Well, good day, folks. It's Bob Wiele here, president and founder of One Smart World, and thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule for the next 30 minutes. We appreciate your interest in your own learning and growth, and our goal as our team here at One Smart World is to provide you with a lot of information in a short period of time that'll be available to you in a number of ways after the session. For those of you who have joined us for the first time, the webinars take approximately 30 minutes. They cover a lot of information. We try and bring it down to the practical level as much as we can. And we will encourage you to use the materials that we send you after the program is over as well. So as we go forward, pardon me here, our subject today is how to Be Exceptional, based on a new book by Zenger and Folkman. And anybody who watched the powerful Felix Baumgartner leap into space was an example of how to be exceptional. These kinds of stories are around us all the time. And what I want to do today is try and demystify some of the things that are going on and to give you some practical tools that you can use in your own setting as a leader and in the teams that you work in. So our focus is on how to be exceptional, and we're going to focus on the kinds of ways that people who are exceptional operate, the way that they think. People who decide to be exceptional don't go for the status quo. They stand outside the box, and they're the ones who stretch the paradigm. The webinar today will be recorded, so you can share it. So many of our clients take this as a professional development opportunity and share it with their colleagues. You'll also receive a slide deck of the presentation afterwards. In terms of posing questions, we've got a little opportunity down here to pose a question, and we'll do our best to answer them as quickly as we can before the end of the webinar. And the ones we can't answer, we'll follow up with you. For those of you who are tweeters, please use the #sign Smart Thinking to follow the conversation, and we always give prizes away to anybody who participates in the Twitter conversation. For those of you who don't know our company, in a quick nutshell, we work in two sectors. In business, we accelerate collaborative teamwork and innovation. And in education, we work with a variety of school boards and colleges and universities to prepare students for the 21st century that they're entering into. In today's webinar, we've got people from the corporate sector, we've got people from colleges and universities, we've got people from governments at 3 different levels, and we've got people from around the United States and Canada who represent these sectors. Again, for those of you who don't know us, we work with a variety of mid-sized and large organizations on the corporate side. And on the education side, we work with independent schools, we work with colleges, universities, and graduate programs. So we've been really delighted to have this kind of impact on the clients that we work with. The context that we operate in these days that requires exceptional behavior has been summarized by the US military as VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And we've added a little twist on that. We think it's going faster than ever. And all you have to do is watch the pages of the business section or the front page of the paper, or watch what's happening in your organization and see how quickly things are moving. And so it requires us to do things differently, to be exceptional. The book we're going to be referring to today is just produced by two of the real leaders in this field, John Zenger and Joseph Folkman, and their colleagues, Robert Sherwin and Barbara Steel. And the reason we chose the book is it's clear in the organizations we see that just being good enough isn't good enough anymore. We've got to find better ways to go to that next level. What I liked about the book too is it's based on a lot of solid research findings, which I'll be sharing with you in the webinar. And one of the really interesting findings they came up with was about cross-training. So that's going to be one of our 3 topics in the presentation. It offers practical tips for leaders and teams, and it links to some work by a performance psychologist, John Elliott, who wrote a book called Overachievement that we'll refer to in the final section of the webinar. The 5 key points that we're going to be touching today are going to, first of all, to take a look at the Zenger-Folkman research and what's the impact of exceptional leaders. And then we'll follow through with how do they operate, how do we develop them, tell me more about cross-training. Then I want to take a look at some of the stuff that John Elliott has been using. I've found his stuff over the years extremely helpful, and he like Zenger and Folkman, focus on how to be exceptional. So let's get going. The very first section of the webinar is going to cover some of the research findings that these guys have come up with. And what they found is that leaders who are multidimensional, in other words, have a variety of skills that are in the top 10 percentile, 90th percentile, make an extraordinary impact on their organizations on a variety of levels. And anyone who's worked with a great leader knows that they're more than just a one-trick pony. They've got a variety of skill sets that they bring to the table. So let's take a look quickly at some of this information. What you can see are on the right-hand side that leaders who have a variety of 3 to 5 competencies function in the 80th to 100th percentile. Organizational leaders that have no competencies or low competencies really don't bring out employee engagement whatsoever. For those of you interested in customer satisfaction, again, we found that the top 20% leaders were in the higher percentiles, had a significant impact on customer service ratings. And not surprising, leaders who had uh, poor capabilities had an impact on their employees, which of course filtered down to the customers. Here's what the thing that really blew my mind. The multidimensional leaders, and we'll talk about what these dimensions are shortly. Those who were highly effective had a 6 times impact on sales. That's the 700, 600, 500 refers to $700,000. So there was a 6 time impact between the bottom 10% of leaders on sales performance in organization and the top. So the kinds of stuff that they found is pretty important on a lot of levels, from motivating your team to getting the customers happy, but also getting high impact in terms of your productivity and sales performance. And much like Sears found a number of years ago, that the higher the employee satisfaction, the higher the degree of customer satisfaction. And employees who are happy will tend to stick around. And why do they do that? Because they've got good leaders. So that's great, but what do leaders do that makes them a little bit different? Well, they think differently. And the Henry Ford quote you've all seen before: whether you believe that you can or you can't, you're usually right. Well, we've seen examples of exceptional people again over the last little while. Anybody who's followed the remarkable crusade of this 14-year-old girl, Malala, in Pakistan, who stood out and stood up to the Taliban and advocated the right and the need for girls to have equal access to education, is a story of compelling courage. She's a 14-year-old kid, and here's what she's done. She's recovering now, and the world is with her. But it's an extraordinary example of an exceptional young person empowering herself to go and do things. So what we find in looking at these exceptional people, that they are people who do amazing things. And what Elliot talks about, and this has been a focus of our work for the last number of decades, that everyone is born with the ability to have an exceptional mind. We just need to think differently and not care that what other people will say that you're crazy. And this is one of the hallmarks of people who are exceptional. They basically go to the next level, as Felix did. For those of you who are interested in what the impact of that thinking differently makes, this is a chart that was found in the work in the talent code, where they looked at the green line is kids who started playing an instrument right at the very beginning, said, I'm going to play this for a long time. I'm going to make a long time commitment to this. The people in the middle said, I might play this for as long as I'm in school. And the people on the bottom said, I'm just here for a short time. What they found was, at high levels of practice, exactly the same amount of practice, there was a significant difference between performance, almost to a 3 times factor between the short-term commitment to the long-term commitment. So exceptional people tend to make a commitment for the long term to make a difference. Anybody who followed this young woman, her name is Annalise Carr. This is another 14-year-old. I've got 3 14-year-olds today that I'm featuring, other than Malala. Annalise Carr is a 14-year-old girl who decided about a year ago that she wanted to swim across Lake Ontario, the youngest person ever to do it, and put a team together that worked diligently, much like Felix Baumgartner, a support team that got her from where she started from to where she wanted to be. What we find that in the work we do, that we're working in organizations that are complex, and that's why exceptional performance is so important. We've got people who come from different places and different ages and genders. They know different things. They bring different skills to the workplace, and also they think differently. They think and feel differently, and that's another conflicting issue in terms of how do people come to the workplace and bring out that performance. And what leaders need to do is understand those differences and be able to play to them successfully. So what Zenger and Folkman talked about was that competencies in the top 10 to 20% differentiated leaders. And it was something that was transferable from one situation to the other, and that one strength did not diminish another. For those of you who know our work, you can be high in red in decision making and still be highly effective in analytical thinking and compassion or creativity. So one did not diminish another. In fact, they strengthened each other. And how did they develop these skills? By focused effort and deliberate practice. So when they looked at leadership development, there's the old battle, is it nature versus nurture? Are leaders born or are they made? And what we consistently find is that, like most other skills, talent and genetics help you get in the door, but it's the hard work and deliberate practice that makes the difference. What they found was that in comparing and contrasting great leaders versus poor leaders, that the great leaders were almost like talent magnets. People wanted to work with them because they knew they would grow under them. And the great leaders had the ability to kind of pull strength and the skills out of other people. And that great leaders didn't jump around. They stayed in the same organization and they helped build that organization. While people who are on the other side, as you can see, not only crushed spirit, but also drove smart people into other organizations. So what we find in our work is that when people think differently and are pulling in different directions, it's critical to get everyone going in the same direction. And there was a great example from anybody who follows sports, as I obviously do, from the San Francisco Giants. About a week ago, they were down 2-0 going into Cincinnati in a 5-game series. Whoever wins 3 wins the series and moves on to the next level. And the guy on the right is a guy called Hunter Pence. And he's had only joined the team in July. And he apparently, before the 3rd game, when all the money was on the line and everyone had written them off, because no team had ever come back in history from being 2 games down, going into their enemy territory, he grabbed these guys and he looked them in the eye and he said, "I love you guys. You're the best team I've ever played with. I want to play another game. So let's go out there and win." And apparently it just electrified the group. And they began pulling in the same direction. And anybody who followed that series, they pulled off 3 remarkable victories in a row and are now well on their way to the next step towards the World Series. But it took an ordinary person to do something exceptional to bring out the best in people. So how do we develop leaders? Well, you got to find people who want to do this, of course, who are the right people, and you've got to identify what are the competencies that you want. I'm going to show you what Zenger Folkman's competencies are in a second. And then one of the critical things that they found was the leaders who are most exceptional have the opportunity to develop their direct reports. And I've worked in a number of organizations recently, and I've just been amazed at the quality of some of the people I've seen who really have an ability to foster and grow the talents of the people around them. And these leaders are uncompromising. They set the bar high for outstanding performance. They don't settle for less. So these are the core competencies that these folks came up with, and we're going to talk about how the cross-training works in a second. Character, of course, was important. Personal capability was not only around developing yourself, but talked about solving problems and knowing your stuff, your technical and professional expertise. There was also a red part in there around focusing on results. There was a yellow interpersonal skills piece in there. And there was a lot of white around leading change, that initiative being so important, that ability to network as well. So what they found was that the leaders who had skills in all of these areas were far more effective than someone who had good personal capability but didn't focus on results and missed out on building people's skills around them. So one of the key things that they found was that cross-training in those competencies, let me go back for a second, that if I start to work on my personal capability, that can have an impact on my results. If I work on my interpersonal skills, that can have an impact on leading change. So one of the things that they found was the correlations, and they didn't understand why it worked, but they used the example of cross-training. And if you think of athletes in cross-training, they're often people who are good they do different disciplines in order to strengthen the main discipline. In Canada, there's a lot of hockey players who play lacrosse in the summer, and that cross-training seems to make them more effective in terms of hand-eye coordination, and that transfers to the hockey arena. A good friend of mine is Andy Higgins, who I saw last night. Andy has been a 4-time Olympic coach in the decathlon. And what he told me a couple of years ago was in the old days of the decathlon is 10 different events that involve throwing, jumping, and running from the high jump as we see here to the discus, to the 1500 meter, to the 100-meter dash, etc. He said in the old days, champion athletes could be good enough in 7 events to win. He said, right now, you can't win at the Olympic level or the world class level in the decathlon unless you're good enough in all 10 and then exceptional in 2 or 3 that take you over the top. You can't have a lagging capability. And I think we see that a lot in the organizations we work with today as well. And when we work with students, the importance of them being able to develop their skills in analytical thinking, in being creative people, in terms of having the ability to work with others who are different than they are, and also cut to the chase and make decisions and bring that resilience is a critical set of skills for them. Here's another example of us. This was, again, a story I found in the paper last week in preparing for this. This is a 14-year-old kid. He's our third 14-year-old after Malala and Annalise Carr. These are exceptional young people. He's a kid who's never had a coach who throws the discus and the shot put. He lives on an island in the middle of one of the Great Lakes, no track and field club around, and he decided he needed coaching. So he found a guy in Rhode Island who's a track coach, and he sends him $497 every 3 months, and every week sends him a video of 20 to 25 of his throws. And the following week, the fellow does a voiceover on the video, helping him correct his technique. And to me, it was a remarkable example of, and this young man, by the way, went on to win the Ontario Championship here in Canada and the Canadian National Legion Track and Field Championship in the past year. So again, somebody who was focused on building his exceptional skills, but used different ways of going about it. So now we know that you can identify your strengths. There's a lot of stuff on that, and that new strengths can be developed. And one of the concerns I have with the book we're reading or referring to is that they use strength in kind of a loose way. I've always believed that you only can get better if you work on your game. So you need to know your strengths, but you need to expand your capabilities. And the more you can do that, the research they're showing is if you can be effective in 3 to 5 of those core competencies, you can really grow, and that cross training is the way to do it. So what cross training basically says is if you work in one of these areas, you can use it as a building block to transfer to another skill. Much like if you're a runner and you work out in the pool, that resistance in the water can be transferable to being effective in your running. And so that a high level of skill tends to flow over into the other skill area, which is a really cool finding. That what they're basically saying is that let me just go back here for a sec. What they're basically saying is doing more and more of the same thing takes you to a plateau, and until you shift and expand your vision and expand your skill set, you won't be able to go to the next level. So cross training seems to be, from a leadership development point of view, for those of you who are doing that both with young people and in organizations, is if someone needs to work on something, the courses and the mentoring will only take them so far, and by shifting gears to something else can make a difference. What they found, for example, that behaviors that were correlated to technical competence, in other words, people who are rated high on technical competence by their colleagues, were also identified as being really good at solving problems and relationship building and networking and communication skills. And the comment they made was, well, maybe by talking to other people and spending time connecting with other people, they're learning and from other people. I remember working when I was with the Ontario Association of Architects many years ago. We found that the way that architects like to learn, which was to build their technical competence, was not by books and courses, but by talking to contractors, because those contractors were people who knew what was going on in terms of what needs to be built and how it needs to be built. And they were the ones who really helped them build their skills. So, by going to take more technical competence courses wasn't as effective as solving problems, building relationships, or communicating. That seemed to amplify that technical competence by reaching out into other areas. When they looked at the behaviors correlated to practices of self-development, what Zenger and Folkman found was that people who listened, who were open to ideas from others, and not only showed respect and displayed integrity, tended to be people who were seen to be getting better. But the getting better came from connecting to other people. So we understand the Felix Baumgartner kind of thing in terms of taking initiative and willing to take risks. But anybody who followed that, and we watched that whole thing unfold on Sunday, what was incredibly amazing to me was the mentoring he was getting from 80-year-old, I think it was Joe Kittinger, who set the record in 1961. And he was clearly he was thrilled at what Felix was doing. So Felix was developing his technical competence, but also was working on his game by working closely with this fellow. So working on your game, what Zenger and Folkman recommend, and for those of you who are doing coaching or mentoring with young people or with leaders or teaching leaders, because we've got a number of consultants on the call today, or people involved in leadership development, if you can help people build an excellent cross-training development plan as opposed to focusing only on the single competency, and to zero in on specific pieces. We know that deliberate practice is critical, and if I can become more technically competent by listening to other people and being open to their ideas, isn't that a cool understanding as opposed to taking yet another course at night? And that for people who are successful, they allocate time and attention to this, and it's something they build into a concerted time. So when I think of that young Joe Maxwell, the discus thrower, and who is the 14-year-old, what he does every week, he trains, but he trains completely on his own, and his only feedback as a coach he's never met and actually never talked to, but receives feedback on what he does and how he does it. Which brings me to the next part of the final section of the webinar. One of the things that we found is that exceptional people think differently, as we mentioned earlier, and they do exceptional thinking. And one of the things we're working with in the colleges and schools that we're working in is kids don't know how to think. Many kids know how to acquire information and perform well on multitask, multiple choice kinds of instruments, but they haven't learned how to think. And what's incredible in today's world is as we have increasing inequities in income, one of the things you can do to compete in this 21st century is become a great thinker. And it doesn't cost any money. It just requires disciplined work. And so what I want to wrap up with in this webinar is some work done by John Elliott that helps take the stuff that was covered in the first part by Zenger and Folkman and brings it into some very simple day-to-day practices. John Elliott wrote a cool book called Overachievement, and it kind of is annoying because he challenges a lot of thinking that other performance psychologists have done. And I quite liked it because it was quite practical, and it was a real kind of in the moment, here's what you do. So I'm just going to hit several of the highlights here from his work, and then we'll wrap up. For those of you who followed the remarkable Felix, I remember a month ago I said, this guy is crazy. We're going to watch him fry. And then I watched the deliberateness that every single step of the way, and that final checklist when they were going through that, how every angle had been covered and how he was internally completely ready, blew my mind. What Elliot talked about was when you're performing, and I think today of preparing for these webinars, it takes a lot of time to prepare for them, get in the right mindset. And I think recently I was doing a keynote presentation in a lecture hall at a university, and I didn't make the shift from mindset, preparation mindset, to performing mindset. And I focused too much on the external stuff as opposed to focusing in on what I can control. And I didn't make the transition. And what he talks about in the 5 points I'm going to show you here as part of this exceptional thinking are some ways to get in your game, because every one of you has to make presentations. Every one of you is in meetings. Every one of you has hallway conversations that can distract you, or you can make those high performance moments. So let me take you through quickly what he's advising us on. And these are things that I've used that I found particularly helpful when under pressure. And it aligns completely with Anders Ericsson, who is the premier guy on how to be competent. And he talks about deliberate practice. And he says research across domains, whether it's leadership, music, art, you name it, science, it's only by working at what you can't do that you become the expert that you want to become. So much like Zenger and Folkman talk about their capabilities, it's critical to use cross-training to get across to build those skills across the various domains, even though you may only like one or two. So let's take a look at the points he's got. And this to me was a really interesting one. Anyone who's worked in sport, the more you focus on the way that you do things, and not worry about the outcome is the key to performance. High performers who lose games often talk about how well they played. They won't worry about the outcome because that's part of the uncontrollable thing. You can't always control the circumstances, but you can control what you do and how you do it. And so focusing on the present is a critical skill set. You focus on the how. So if I focus on a moment to moment basis and I can reset myself between one task to another, I'm likely to be much more effective. The second point he makes is he calls it target shooting. He says pick a particular area that you want to work on. And in the lecture I gave recently, I was so um, concerned about being nice and meeting people, I didn't switch into my performance mindset. So when it was showtime, I was in the hi, how are you kind of mellow framework. And I didn't pick the kind of image in my mind that I had about exploding on the stage and delivering a compelling lecture because it was 7 o'clock at night and these students all wanted to go out and have beers, as I did as well. But I needed to be on my game. So I was okay, but I wasn't great. And I didn't do this particular piece. I didn't put myself in the state of mind that I needed to be in, and then simplify that and then engage in that completely and not worry about any other distractions. So one of the key messages this fellow has is always focus in the moment on the how. The more you do that, the more the outcomes will take care of themselves. And much like 14-year-old Joseph Maxwell, the discus thrower, by getting that feedback on the how, he's much more likely to be successful. The thing we've covered in other workshops as well is around the importance of routine. The exceptional thinkers have routines. And what does that mean? They don't waste time with distractions. They've got their pre-performance routine in place. I know what to do step by step by step, whether it's Michael Phelps preparing for an Olympic game, or you're about to give a major presentation and you're in the hallway and you're bouncing on your toes to get in the right mindset, or you're taking deep breaths to bring yourself down before going into an important and critical meeting with your boss. So the more you can develop your routine, the better. And what Elliot says that I really like, he says, don't go for checklists. Develop your own routine. You know yourself. This is something that you can do. So let's take a look at the next one here. The personal performance philosophy. He says, build your own personal performance philosophy. He says, you can't always control events, but I can control my reaction to them. And as I look at this slide, I realize this is the slide doesn't have the number in front of it, and I made an error there. So I can't control that, but I can control my reaction to it. So things like, pressure turns coal into diamonds, work smarter, not harder. My success is based on how I use my inner skills. That whole thing around empowering oneself to take over those controllable things will really make a difference. Or as you see with the exceptional performers like Malala or Annalise Carr or Joseph Maxwell or Felix Baumgartner, they get that picture in their mind and then they start to really amplify that and play that out. And finally, it's critical to give yourself feedback. Much like the coach gives feedback to the thrower that the thrower doesn't see, if you can keep track of what you do on the qualitative side, and he has things that pulled out of sports psychology that I really like. When you think of the meetings you go to, how well did I manage my eyes? Did I scan the room? Did I clarify the question that people were asking? Did I make sure that my enthusiasm was there from top to bottom, front to back, throughout the whole thing? Did I maintain that enthusiasm? Was I always really clear on what my purpose was? That whole thing about making sure that I didn't waver and divert from where I was. And did I allow my obstacles to throw me back on track as opposed to throw me off track? So in terms of measuring, he and Folkman and Zenger also talk about the importance of feedback. Be organized, get intentional feedback, and block out some time by keeping a journal and taking some notes, and focus on the hows. That's going to be your key to success. So as we wrap up, our next Smart Thinking webinar is What's New in Innovation. It's going to be on Wednesday, November 17th. It's almost innovation squared. I want to give you some insight in terms of a couple of new approaches to innovation. For those of you who are interested in our work, we work on improving personal and professional effectiveness. Our real focus these days is on accelerating collaborative teamwork and innovation, and we also run certification programs. For those of you interested in that, we've got our certification coming up in November and December. Our partner, the Canadian Management Centre, is hosting a couple of our courses in Calgary in late November, and of course they work with a lot of their Intact clients to deliver our programs. So I want to thank you for taking your time. I know how busy everyone is. We will be getting you the slide deck, and this presentation has been recorded, so you can play it over again. We encourage you to use the information. Our whole focus in these webinars is to give people tools that they can use to get a little bit better and work a little bit smarter. We hope that you found it helpful. We really thank you for your time. And if you like what you've heard, if you want to pass it on to someone else, that would be great. So again, on behalf of Lisa Wiele, Mandy St. Germain, I'm Bob Wiele, the founder and president of One Smart World, thanking you for your time, and we look forward to our next connection. Hope you have a great day, a great week, and we'll stay connected. Take good care. We'll talk to you soon.